When you've got wealth, you can speculate. When you don't have wealth, you must speculate. In other words, the people that don't yet have years and years of their income saved up, they can afford to get into a random meme coin and hope to make a 100x. But once you've got several years, right? Once you have, say, 5 years of your income saved up, you don't want to risk it all anymore. Because if your wealth drops by 50% when you've only got 1 month saved up, that's no problem. You simply just have to save again. You have to work a bit more. You can get that back very quickly. If you've got a lot of wealth, you can't just work harder and get that back quickly. You have to somewhat be more cautious. Now, the art is to be cautious, but still to be able to escape monetary debasement. Because money supply grows by roughly 6.8% per annum. That's the minimum return you need to get over the long term. And in this video, I want to talk about a different vehicle that many people don't yet have on their radar, how to potentially protect yourself against debasement. What we've got over here is the price of silver relative to US money supply. Yes, I know this is the Bitcoin strategy channel, but we want to own more than just Bitcoin. We don't want to get our neck completely destroyed just because we see a drop of the Bitcoin price to its realized price, right? The thing we talked about time and time again on this channel. The average cost basis of a Bitcoin holder is currently at 31,000 and the price long term tends to hover around the average cost basis. If we are below, it's great to buy. If we are above, we have to be somewhat diversified. And silver can be a potential diversifier. At least for the last 35 years, it kept pace with monetary expansion with the 6.8% per annum, because that's how much more money gets printed all the time. And probably this is going to accelerate in a month or two yet again, because interest rates are expected to get lowered in September. And the cutting of interest rates is likely going to continue for at least another year. Now, here's the nice thing about silver. At the top, we've got the silver price. At the bottom, we've got the correlation coefficient of silver relative to Bitcoin. And this is hovering nicely between +1 and -1, so there is no real correlation. Bitcoin can crash and silver stays up, and vice versa. Silver might crash, but Bitcoin can rally. So this is a nice diversifier. We don't want to be exposed to this, right? That all of our assets go down at the same time and we can't buy the bottom. If we've got some assets that are not correlated to all of those, then we can buy the bottom, right? We can potentially sell some of the silver in that case and buy crypto. And again, the proof for that is in this low correlation. It shows here mathematically that the two assets do not necessarily move in the same direction at the same time. So silver hedges against monetary debasement, and it appears as if silver is relatively cheap now, relative to stocks, but also relative to gold. So let's start off with the stock market. This is a chart you've probably never seen before. This is the silver price divided by the S&P 500. And this chart is very long-term in nature. It starts in 1910, so that's more than 100 years of data. And sometimes silver is performing phenomenally well. Sometimes stocks are doing better. And yes, timing this somewhat right is important. The drop from top to bottom here was 99%. The rally from the bottom of the 2000s to the tops in 2011 was more than a 10x. And so in the grand scheme of things, it appears as if silver is again very cheap compared to stocks. So God knows what's going to happen, right? But in case we suddenly see a random financial crisis out of nowhere, this might appreciate, while Bitcoin and all kinds of other altcoins might get completely decimated. Now what we've got here in turquoise is a 7.5-year simple moving average. And this is simply just fitting the data a little bit. It shows when the momentum is on our side. Currently, people do not yet have silver on their radar. So I'm not saying that this is necessarily the best time ever to buy silver, but historically we have rarely seen such low levels. Here's the problem with crypto YouTube. People promoting becoming degen or buying 100x coins. That's what gives clicks, but that's not what's going to bring you forward. I refuse to take money from centralized exchanges. I refuse to take money from crypto projects. I refuse to pump and dump a coin and filling up my pockets in the background. I don't do any of this. Instead, I share my knowledge in the form of tutorials in the premium membership. So that's content that won't do well on YouTube, but that builds up skill over time. You can also directly contact me over there. You can directly pick my brain. Feel free to check it out. thebitcoinstrategy.com is the link. And so yes, of course, the expected return of holding silver versus, say, Bitcoin over the next 10, 20 years is not as high. But this is not what this is all about. This is about staying in the game long enough to not exit when suddenly we crash in Bitcoin or in the stock market, which can happen. I think it's important to be able to buy bottoms. And especially if you've got several years saved up, then you can't just use your cash flow to buy the bottom, right? That additional contribution won't matter much. It's way more important to actually sell what's still high and then buy the bottom. So it's completely rational to find ways to hedge yourself. And that hedge, again, does not cost anything. You still somewhat keep pace with monetary debasement. It's way better to hold silver over the decades compared to just holding cash and hoping to buy the next crash with the cash that you're holding, simply because cash devalues so super quickly. And so silver appears to be cheap relative to stocks, but it also seems to be somewhat cheap relative to gold. And that's why I'm talking about silver and not gold. What we've got over here is the silver price divided by the gold price. And yes, historically we have seen lower levels, but compared to more than 80 years ago, we are at similar levels. So we are not necessarily looking at a long-term underperformer with silver. We simply seem to be historically low. A potential downside versus gold of maybe 25%, a potential upside of maybe 90%, if we are super lucky, maybe 170%. And the reason why I make this an either or discussion, so either silver or gold, and I'm not saying we should own both, is because, again, diversification. The diversification benefit works across asset classes. So when we hold, say, some gold or some silver, and we hold some Bitcoin or some tech stocks, then we have diversification benefit. The two things don't crash at the same time. In other words, we are not faced with this. And that's expressed over here, right? The silver price with the correlation coefficient relative to Bitcoin, for example. But when we change that correlation coefficient, and instead of looking at Bitcoin, we look at the silver correlation coefficient to gold, we see how that is way closer to something positive, right? As in, most of the time, silver tends to move in the same direction as gold. So holding both silver and gold in a portfolio is not necessarily that beneficial. So in other words, I want to be diversified across different asset classes. I want to hold precious metal and crypto and stocks and property, but I want to take the best assets within the asset class. I do not try to diversify within the asset class and own 100 different altcoins. I try to hold the best assets or the best altcoins or the best cryptocurrencies. And I also want to hold the best precious metal. And it seems like silver seems to be now where we are at. Now there's many ways to get into the asset. There's physical silver, there is paper silver. I personally buy a silver ETF. If you want to know which one I buy, which has the lowest cost, etc., feel free to check it out down below. There's the premium membership, thebitcoinstrategy.com. This is also the place where you can ask me any questions, right? You can chat with me one-on-one. You can ask me how to support you with your portfolio, and I try to help wherever I can. If you got something out of this video, feel free to, of course, also subscribe. I publish videos regularly, and if you give this a like, the channel is very likely going to grow further. If you don't want to pay for premium yet, there's also a free Telegram. Looking very much forward to seeing you there as well. Cheers!